Much of Sega's recent success can be attributed to Atlus, the legendary publisher and developer who Sega acquired back in 2013. Here at the Sega Guys, we've long appreciated Atlus's work, but primarily on the retro game scene. The Sega Saturn, for example, benefited greatly from their games, whether it was racers like 2Go King and its sequel, shooters like Gunbird, Strikers 1945 and Donpachi, or fighters like Groove on Fight, and expansive role players like Shin Megami Tensei Devil Summoner. And it's the Shin Megami Tensei games that Atlus would become famous for after Sega stopped making consoles. The main problem for us was that by the time that Persona 3 came to Europe, we'd already moved on to the Xbox 360. 4 arrived on the PS2 in 2009, when the PS3 and the 360 were in full flow, and the games would remain not only exclusive to PlayStation for years, but would maintain higher prices on the second-hand market for years on end. Finally though, after a flirtation on the Nintendo Switch, the series came to the PC and Xbox, and it was finally easy to pick up and play. After trying to sample a couple of entries, it would be Persona 3 Reload, a remake of the 2006 PS2 game, where I would finally commit to playing through a Persona game. Did it do enough to convince this old school Sega fan? Let's take a look. I went into Persona 3 Reload with only a modicum of understanding of what it actually was. My expectation was that of a fairly traditionally playing Japanese role-playing game, albeit one which straddled the setting between the real world and dungeon crawling. The game starts off with an interesting hook. Your nameless, mute character arrives in Iwatodai to start a new school. Within the first moments, you're treated to scenes of people turning into literal coffins at midnight. A haunting looking boy in prison stripes welcoming us into the dorms, and a character pointing a gun at her head. Couple that with the anime style intro whenever you boot up the game, and it quickly gets its hooks into you. Initially, things do start off a little bit slow. You begin school, you start to make friends, and you're introduced to the various social aspects of the game. Initially, you may feel that there is a lot of text, and perhaps you may think that not all of it is particularly interesting or relevant. Personally though, I was intrigued by these initial engagements, as they were quite unlike anything I'd experienced in a game previously. After a couple of school days, the dorm where the main character is staying is attacked by a giant beast. Your character points the gun dropped by his dorm mate Yukari, yells "Persona!" and summons one of the titular Persona creatures, and you, the player, get your first taste of combat. The battle mechanics are really what drew me into Persona 3 Reload, and those core mechanics are the calling card of the majority of Atlus's SMT titles, as well as that of the recent Metaphor ReFantazio. The crux of Persona's battles is that of identifying and exploiting weaknesses via different attack types. Hit an enemy with an attack or element that they are weak to, and they enter a stun status, with your character getting an extra turn in addition to the enemy suffering increased damage. Set all enemies into a stun status, and your team gets an opportunity to deliver an all-out attack, which triggers a short cinematic in which your entire team will enter a melee, delivering significant damage on all enemies in the battle. These aspects and so many more are slowly rolled out to players. After the first battle and a number of additional cinematics and social sections, you are introduced to Tartarus. This is the main dungeon of the game, and one you'll return to regularly. It is here that you'll progress up through the floors, climbing up through the tower throughout the game and battling the enemies known as shadows. The game slowly unveils additional gameplay components as you progress. For example, early on you're introduced to the shift mechanic, allowing you to swap characters after a successful attack on an enemy's weakness, and later introducing the SEGAGuy mechanic that works a little bit like Final Fantasy VII's limit breaks. The last 2 points are actually new to the Reload remake, and as far as I'm aware, they were not in the original Persona 3 on PS2, as is the case with being able to control all of your team in the remake as opposed to the original where their attacks were automated. This all adds up to what I found an absolutely glorious battle system, and it was these first throws in Tartarus that really drew me in. Tartarus itself is mostly a procedurally generated dungeon. For some, running the same environment over and over may seem a little bit off-putting. For me though, as a veteran of thousands of hours of Phantasy Star Online, this sort of grinding dungeon crawling was right up my alley, and I was loving every moment of it. But slowly and surely, other elements of Persona 3 Reload were getting their hooks into me. Coming back to the titular personas, each character has their own persona, which may evolve at certain key points of the game, with every persona having specific elemental or physical strengths and weaknesses. There's an exception though. The protagonist can wield multiple personas, switching their equipped persona during and in between battles. The various personas themselves can be collected via the post-battle shuffle system, where you draw cards after a successful fight to gain bonuses. These personas can be fused to create new personas, and this is done via the Velvet Room, where the enigmatic Igor and Elizabeth will help the protagonist to create new personas by fusing existing ones, or you can summon a lost persona for a fee. Your personas are tracked in a compendium, and the phrase "gotta catch 'em all" immediately springs to mind when you see the completion percentage. The focus quickly turns to accumulating varied and powerful personas to assist you in battle. And just how do you ensure that they are strong enough? Well, that's actually tied to your activities outside of Tartarus. Although you can spend hours at a time in the dungeon grinding out your levels, you will spend just as much time in the real world. Persona 3 is governed by a calendar that takes you through a Japanese school year. You'll attend school daily, answer questions during lessons, listen to lectures, and after school, hang out with your classmates. That might sound a little mundane, and the prospect of going back to school for many adults might not make a compelling game. However, sticking with it, I found it to be one of Persona 3 Reload's most compelling aspects. Engagements start innocently enough, and eventually you'll earn points attaching you to the friend's arcana. Those arcana are attached to the personas and tie in to their elemental strengths and weaknesses, as well as that of the enemies and bosses. Building strong relationships improves your arcana, giving you bonuses when fusing personas, which is essential for ensuring that you're well equipped for the battles ahead. But soon, those sub-stories become more than a means to an end. I found myself genuinely invested in the tales that ranged from a friend having an infatuation with their school teacher, to a kid whose parents were getting divorced, and a young man who is suffering from a terminal illness. Your ability to build attachments and influence these friends may offer fusion bonuses, but I felt genuine emotional attachment to many of these, or at least intrigue in seeing how these sub-stories played out. The main story moves between the real world and the Dark Hour as the dialogue and events are similarly driven by the calendar. Every month during the full moon, monstrous boss shadows attached to specific arcana will appear, with the core cast tasked with eliminating these super shadows, which they hope will bring an end to the Dark Hour and destroy Tartarus. Things, of course, are not that simple, and there's some fantastic twists and turns throughout the game, as well as highly emotive storyboards during this huge 100-hour journey through Persona 3 Reload. Having a game that lasts that long truly requires the player to be fully invested, and it goes without saying that I was absolutely invested in Persona 3 Reload. It got its claws into me quickly, not just through the intriguing opening sections, but through the style in which the whole game is delivered. The cel-shaded visuals, while technically yielding Xbox One levels of fidelity, are wonderful to behold. Everything is held together with a verve and sheen that makes it a lot more than the sum of its parts. Characters and menus move with astonishing style. Environments, while lacking in geometric detail, are rendered in such a way they accommodate the cel-shaded protagonist. In fact, coupled with the opening introduction that greets the player every time the game is loaded, the visuals give the impression of watching an anime. This is further accentuated by the absolutely phenomenal soundtrack. The opening sequence has a fantastic vocal track that accompanies the animation that is so good you'll be tempted to watch it every time you load the game up, again, just like an anime. But that musical quality continues into the main game. numerous vocal tunes, back scenes and areas where other games would offer more ambient or additive arrangements. As you navigate the school day, the utterly enthralling Want to Be Close will play, and just a few days in, I found myself singing along to that tune. On the other hand, when exploring Tartarus, two tracks will alternate. The excellent high energy rapping track It's Going Down Now, tag teaming with the equally excellent though slower paced Mass Destruction. There's an abundance of tracks throughout the game that not only suit the game fantastically well, but contribute to giving the game the sort of playlist that is great for listening to outside of the game. I know that I did, which is kind of clever really, given that the main character sports an early 2000s MP3 player and the soundtrack is pretty much inferred to be playing through that device during the game. This is all just the tip of the iceberg in terms of Persona 3 Reload. There is so much more that we could discuss in terms of content, in terms of mechanics and story, but I won't go into all of it. Firstly, because anyone who hasn't played Persona 3 really should discover it for themselves. And secondly, because this video would be about 10 times as long as it is now. And thirdly, those who have played the Persona series will likely be familiar enough with these details and may just be here to hear how this grizzled old Sega head feels about the game. So, after 120 hours of Persona 3 Reload, how does this Sega fan feel about the series? Calling Persona 3 Reload my first Persona isn't entirely accurate. I did play about 2 hours of Persona 5 Royal when it came to Game Pass, and that was it. I also played a few hours of Soul Hackers 2, which I absolutely loved, but was hesitant to dig into beyond their opening sections due to their length, reasoning that I'd prefer to own the physical versions of those games to play at my leisure than try to beat them on Game Pass before they left the service. But when Persona 3 Reload hit, something clicked immediately and I simply couldn't put it down. Whether it was that opening section, the addiction of grinding out the dungeon that is Tartarus, or the attachment that I was experiencing as I got to know the characters in the game, I found myself dipping into Persona 3 Reload all the time. The combination of stylish visuals, incredible soundtrack, addictive gameplay, gripping story and emotive character engagements kept me playing throughout the year. Given other games in my playlist, as well as creating content for the SEGAGuy channel to manage amongst my real life work and family responsibilities, I wasn't simply able to blitz through Persona 3 Reload in one go. But that might be why I appreciated it even more. I'd slowly enjoy Persona 3 Reload as if it were a show I'd watch for an hour or two a day, give or take. And it's worth noting where I played this too. You see, despite what I said about Persona 5 and Soul Hackers 2, I stuck it out to play Persona 3 Reload on Game Pass. And while this is a game I'd want to own a physical copy of, that it was on the service long enough for me to beat is a testament to the service itself. Not only that, but despite spending about 90% of my gaming time playing this game on PC, I played it across a range of devices. A little bit on my Xbox Series X in my living room, some of the time on my Xbox Series S in my bedroom. I played it remotely too, connecting to my consoles when out of the house, via xCloud or via remote play. Now that is a fantastic degree of flexibility. Oh, and did I also mention that Persona 3 Reload Season Pass was also given away as a perk on the Game Pass service, allowing me to play the equally awesome Operation Aegis? Brilliant stuff. So yes, this old Sega head has fallen head over heels in love with Persona 3 Reload. But more than that, now that Atlus are finally bringing their games to more platforms, I've been able to absolutely gorge myself on their games, getting in on Metaphor ReFantazio after being blown away by the demo, leading me to buy the full physical game to sit alongside Soul Hackers 2, Persona 5 Royal and Unicorn Overlord. It's fair to say that Persona 3 Reload has had a profound impact on me, and with the incredible work Sega has done on expanding the audiences for Atlus's works in recent years, we are now all in on Persona, Atlus and modern day Sega. With Sega and Atlus providing gamers with 5 of the best games this year, including this Persona 3 remake and serial Game of the Year nominee Metaphor ReFantazio, the good times are set to continue. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for watching, and please drop a like and a subscribe as that really helps the channel. And if you want to be extra mega, think about becoming a member with a bunch of awesome perks from as little as 99p. But regardless of any of that, thank you so much for watching, and we will see you on the Sega side.
All enemies defeated. Good work out there.